Let's do a video on ethical hacking, and we can determine the scope of an ethical hacking project. Remember, this is all educational and should only be used for educational purposes unless you have the express permission of the owners. The reconnaissance phase is a crucial aspect of penetration testing. It's all about gathering as much information as possible about the target. This can lead to a much more effective exploitation phase later on. Passive information gathering. Domain information. Use tools like the Harvester to find emails, subdomains, hosts, and the like. Analyze social media and forums, GitHub repositories, and public forums to identify potential leakages of sensitive information. Analyze autonomous system and related IP ranges using tools like Robtex or BGPview. Active information gathering. Subdomain enumeration. Tools like Subfinder can be used to find subdomains. Perform a detailed port scan using MAP with specific scripts. Identify technologies, server types, and versions using tools like WhatWeb. Use Netcat or Telnet to grab service banners and identify service versions. Use GoBuster or DearBuster for directory and file discovery. Analyzing HTML comments, metadata in documents like PDFs, Word files, and spreadsheets might reveal hidden paths, usernames, or other sensitive information. Tools like Eyewitness can screenshot web pages across multiple subdomains to visually identify interesting entry points. Identifying misconfigured buckets. Check for publicly accessible or misconfigured AWS Second3 buckets, Azure blobs, etc. If the target uses public APIs, analyze Swagger documentation or other API descriptions for potential weaknesses. Reconnaissance is an extensive process that lays the groundwork for the rest of the penetration test. The more information you can gather, the better your understanding of the target's attack surface. This phase should be approached methodically, utilizing a combination of passive and active techniques. Advanced reconnaissance involves a deep understanding of the target's technologies, infrastructure, and potentially even their business and employees. It's both an art and a science, requiring creativity, patience, and technical skill. Now we've done our reconnaissance and scoping, it's time to look at vulnerability analysis. Is a pivotal phase where the information gathered during the reconnaissance phase is used to identify weaknesses and vulnerabilities in the target system. Source code review. If source code is available, perform a manual analysis to identify issues such as insecure coding practices, hard-coded secrets, and weak cryptography. Manually browse the application with proxy tools like Burp Suite to understand the application flow and logic, looking for weaknesses. Analyze configurations of servers, applications, and databases to identify misconfigurations. Use tools like OWASP, ZAP, or Nessus to automatically scan for common vulnerabilities. Tools like OpenVAS can identify network-level vulnerabilities. Utilize fuzzers like FL or Peach Fuzzer to identify unexpected application behavior, potentially leading to vulnerabilities. Review authentication processes, including mechanisms like OAuth, SSO, JWT, etc. for potential weaknesses. Identify issues in the business logic that could be exploited. These are often unique to the application and require a deep understanding of its functionality. Identify the presence of web application firewalls and attempt to bypass them using tools like WF-Woofer manual techniques. If you want to use a specific method or add additional parameters, you can do so. For example, to send a GET request and include verbose output, you might run this command. If the application uses containers like Docker or orchestrators like Kubernetes, analyze their configuration and permissions. Assess the cloud infrastructure on AWS, Azure, GCP for misconfigurations using tools like Scout Suite. If the application exposes APIs, use tools like Postman or custom scripts to analyze endpoints for issues like insecure direct object references or I500OR, missing function level access control, 1000F or 100. Correlate findings from different tools and manual analyses to reduce false positives. Manually validate identified vulnerabilities to ensure they are actual exploitable weaknesses. The vulnerability analysis phase is a blend of automated scanning, manual investigation, and creative exploration of the target environment. It requires an understanding of various technologies, protocols, coding practices, and architectural principles. This stage's depth and breadth can vary significantly based on the target, the technologies in use, and the particular risks being assessed. The ultimate goal is to identify and understand potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited in the subsequent exploitation phase. By combining various tools, methodologies, and expert judgment, an ethical hacker aims to provide a comprehensive view of the target's security posture. We've assessed the vulnerabilities. Now it's time for the exploitation phase, where the vulnerabilities identified in the previous stage are actively exploited. If you haven't seen our course on ethical hacking, go over and view it. We have introductions to SQL injection and cross-site scripting, also called XSS. Server-side request forgery, or SSRF. Exploit SSRFF to make unauthorized requests to internal resources or third-party services. You can test by trying to fetch internal resources. For instance, if you can retrieve internal resources, this confirms the SSRF vulnerability. Utilize exposed SSH keys, weak ciphers, or known vulnerabilities in SSH protocols. Explore exposed Windows shares and leverage them for further exploitation. Utilize the Metasploit framework for known vulnerability exploitation. Python script for automating exploitation. This Python script can be used to probe for an SSRF vulnerability, where you want to automate the testing process for different internal URLs. This script will send requests to the target's URL fetching endpoint with various internal IPs to test for an SSRF vulnerability. Here's a simple bash script that you could use to automate the exploitation of a file inclusion vulnerability, where you want to fetch different files from the server. This script would loop through a list of files, making requests to the target URL and checking if the response indicates that the file was found. Both of these scripts are relatively simple, but can serve as the foundation for more complex and tailored exploitation automation, depending on the specific vulnerability and the context in which it is found. Always ensure that you are following all applicable laws, regulations, and ethical guidelines when conducting any form of penetration testing or vulnerability assessment. Post-exploitation activities. Utilize the exploited system as a pivot point to explore and potentially exploit other internal systems. Within the scope and permissions, simulate data exfiltration to show potential data loss risks. Demonstrate methods that an attacker might use to maintain access to the system, whether through backdoors, scheduled tasks, or other means. Remove any artifacts, close connections, and revert changes made during the exploitation to leave the system in its original state. Remember that this is purely educational.